Okay, welcome everybody to session 12 of the recipe, and it's called the cookbook. And I am super excited because this is where we bring it all together. What I'm going to do today is show you how to convert any book, any strategy, any step-by-step guide into tickets that you can follow for the recipe, right? So we can create a set of tickets so that you'll be able to estimate how long it's going to take you to execute on this, what you do know. We're going to apply the certainty principle so that we know, what we know, what we don't know. So you're going to see this all come together by doing a live example here of taking a very popular, not one of my methodologies, but a very popular methodology, and pull it all together in front of you live. And by the way, you're going to work along with me because, of course, we're all at different levels. So something that I know, for example, as a master chef, which would take me, would be one ticket description for you, and it's no stress, but it could be 10 tickets, right? Because you have to learn a whole new thing that you weren't aware of before. But what's the beauty of this whole methodology and the beauty of this whole approach is that it allows you to do all of that. Okay, so let's go. Without further ado, the methodology that I'm going to convert into a recipe so that we can execute and cook it is one of my absolute favorites. It was not done by me. It was done by a gentleman called Taki Moore, and this is from his book. And thank you very much, Taki. By the way, if you haven't gotten $1 Million Coach, it's like $3 or something on the Kindle store, and it's magnificent, and it's the guide and it's the process I use for creating any sort of product. So this is for anybody who's creating a product. This will show you how to build any product. So when you hit the fourth part of the recipe, which is the creation of the product, this is the methodology that I will use 9 out of 10 times. So that's what I will use, literally 9 out of 10 times. So let's have a look. And what we're going to do, and you can see that this section, which is turn our ideas into IP, right? So in this session, what Taki does is he creates a framework around which we can build what he calls, because he's got great names for absolutely everything, a signature system, or in plain language, a course, right? A course that we can create, right? So, and he's got this process, and as you'll see, there are, everything is built on everything else. You'll see that some of the stuff that he's doing are all put together in terms of he has used other people's principles as well, which is all sort of built on. And you can see you're looking at my Kindle edition here, which is all marked up as I went through reading it. Didn't know Zettelkasten back then, otherwise I would have been making smart notes, but that's okay. This really is a book that I've read again and again and recommended again and again. So we have this process, turn ideas into IP. And just like any process, particularly in a great book, there's so many things I could have potentially picked. You've got this book, you've read this book, and you think, okay, I want to execute this. And typically what would happen is that you would start here on page 1 of this section, and you would have a look, and you try to follow it sequentially. What most people would do, of course, is that they would read all through this, and by the time they got to the end of it, it's only a relatively short chapter, it's not that many pages, but by the time they got to the end of it, because it's relatively short, they would still feel some overwhelm about everything that needs to be done. So we need to go through and we need to identify all the elements and break everything down into tickets so that we can execute on it. And most importantly, we can apply the certainty principle, right? Because that's the real, they're the herbs and spices. That's the salt and spices that we can add into our dish, is understanding. And that's the way anybody can take any level of course, whether it's fairly sparsely explained. Like, I think actually Taki does an amazing job explaining things in such a small period. But if you aren't familiar with the processes, then you just go, okay, I don't know where that is. You get overwhelmed and you end up not executing. Okay, so let's get into it. Pardon me. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is let's have a look here. So how do you turn your ideas in your head into valuable intellectual property? Don't worry, I'm not going to read everything. I'm just getting a base. First, let me acknowledge a great friend of mine, an incredibly smart guy, Matt Church, who has a number of incredible, you talk about a person who has created a number of brilliant recipes. Matt Church is one. He has a incredibly popular book recipe, which we've talked about in the Academy, particularly in relation to the Zettelkasten approach of taking smart notes, which I mentioned before. Don't worry about what that is, but it's just a really cool, another cool recipe. Okay, cool methodology. Okay, so let's go through. Matt taught me the anatomy of idea. Everything we build, all of our content courses program, they're all built on ideas, so it's critical you get a feeling for how they work and how to formulate them. Ideas exist on three distinct levels. There's the concept itself. The point of the concept is a simple statement that encapsulates the idea. When you make your point, you have to back it up with some evidence, some facts, some stories to prove your point is valid, true, and correct. So this is where you get down to details. Let me give you an example. Here are the statistics. Okay, what I am looking for here is an action point, right? I'm going through here and I'm keeping an eye at, this is explanation. So as I'm going through this now, I'm looking for explanation. So it talks about the left and the right brain, which is awesome, and things like, important with metaphors, and there's a guide. Now, when Matt taught me how to capture ideas like that, he used a pink sheet. A pink sheet is a worksheet designed specifically for capturing the concept of an idea, the content that backs it up, and the context it relates to. It's divided into three sections. Concept goes in the middle of the page, context goes up the top, content goes down the bottom. Behind every principle in this book, every principle I've ever taught, there's a pink sheet. For example, the section started with the concept, the key point, turn your ideas into IP. Those were the words I wrote in the middle of the pink sheet. Okay. He hasn't actually said to do anything, but there's something that's really crucial, right, that he's mentioned, which is a pink sheet. Has he explained how to do a pink sheet? No. Has he said where you can get a pink sheet? No. What's he said? It said the words Matt Church and pink sheet. So I'm going to go to our metaphoric whiteboard here. And I'm going to go into our Post-it note and write research Matt Church pink sheet. And there are my phrases. I'm putting my quotes in phrases on Google. Okay, so I've created a ticker. I haven't put it in any particular order or any particular thing. I've just popped it. All I've done is pop that on because I want to continue to go because we haven't got into any actual action points. My point here, the whole point of this thing is to create a product, to design a product, right, to deliver to our tribes so we can make some money. So this is a key point, and you've heard that this particular recipe is a fantastic one, which I'm telling you. So I am just creating the ticket. Now, what of course, a lot of high fact finders would have done is they either would have stopped there and gone off researching Pink Sheet and getting completely, who knows, right now, the Pink Sheet may be completely irrelevant to what we're doing. I don't know, but I'm not going to let it stop me. I'm creating a recipe. So I need to I don't know what a ticket is, so I'm researching, Matt Church Pink Sheet on Google. So let's get back to our area. So step one is turn ideas into IP. It's sort of like an introduction. And there's something about these pink sheets that potentially will become important. Who knows, right? So I've created a ticket. That's it. All right, cool. Let's keep going. When we put a few points together to create a content module, we're creating what I call a core, one discrete piece of training, a 60-minute webinar presentation or chapter of a book. They're all cores. Okay, right. I get that. I'm still none the wiser yet. I don't need to know, but I'm practicing a principle that all master chefs practice, and you need to practice and learn how to do as an apprentice chef, which is be here now. So I'm not stressing about, I don't really know what a core is. I'm not stressing about it. Hopefully he'll explain. We're going to use another, see now again, you might notice that Taki in the first section here, he's turning ideas into IP, he's using the technologies and recipes of a master chef, Matt Church. Then in Create a Core, right now he's come up with this cool name, right? But this creating a core is a framework by another master chef, Bernice McCarthy, right? And so Bernice figured out there are 4 kinds of learners in the world, and the best way to engage everybody is to build a lesson plan on these 4 different learning styles, which is great. For some people, the big question that drives them is, what does this matter? Again, I'm just going through. I'm looking for action points now. I'm here creating a recipe. In the first piece, the why piece, I tap into markets, fears, frustrations, wants, and aspirations. Okay, there's a why section. Okay, I get that. By the way, you'll notice here in the diagrams that Taki uses, again, a part of the pink sheet, this is we're stepping out of this a little bit. The pink sheet talks about these diagrams, which are really important. Great. Okay, so what we're now looking at the why section. So target markets, fears, frustration, wants, and aspirations. This is the why piece. So he's got this diagram here. We've got things they want to move towards and away, imagined and immediate. So we need to look at, if you're building a presentation, which we are, right? We're building a lesson, then we need to have a problem stack with 3 frustration slides and 1 fear slide, which takes away, which is the away side of the model, and to build a promise stack, we want 3 want slides and 1 aspiration slide. All right, now we're cooking. We've actually got a tangible action point. Okay, so let's have a look here. So what we need to do is we need to create this chart for our particular project. Okay, the frustrations, wants, fears, and aspirations of our particular tribe. Fortunately, we have really done that. Or have we? Don't know. So let's create a ticket for this. Bloop. Okay, we're going to do create. Now, you'd be doing this with Post-it notes. The only reason I'm doing this digitally is so you can all see it. Okay, that's the only reason. Create a, oops. Let's get rid of that. A Y stack. Do, 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 do. Okay. So we've got another ticket here. Create a Y stack. Fantastic. Now, some of you might be saying, hang on a second, I don't understand any of that. That's fine. We're just identifying our top line parts of the process, right? That's all that we're doing. We just are identifying the key steps of what we need to do to design a course that we can deliver to sell. Okay, cool. So let's have a look here. We've got which add a proof stack placeholder style for your case study or client story. And there's your Y stack done. Okay, see, and there's just a whole, like just a little almost snuck in there. Add a proof stack. Okay, we need a proof stack. So we put that there. And we put create a proof stack. I have no idea why that H is there, but anyway, we'll go with it. Create a proof stack, which is, I'll just write on this, a slide with proof. Cool. Okay, let's keep going. Oops. There we are. Okay. Then we move on to a what piece. A what piece is where you teach 3 to 5 key principles. Each key principle has its own pink sheet. Wow, okay, that's one sentence. That breath, doesn't it roll off the tongue? The what piece is where you teach your 3 to 5 key principles. Each key principle has its own pink sheet. That just sort of goes, so simple, right? But if you break that down, hang on, we've got to do a what section, so we need to do that. That's fine. So let's go to our concept stack here. Okay, so create a what stack. And so I'll just put in here 3 to 5 key points. Each has a pink sheet. Now, I should explain here too, right? I'm writing the key parts of the process on Post-it notes. And what you'll see I'm doing, I've got Post-it notes all over here just so I've got plenty to write on. But what ultimately I'm doing is creating steps across the top of my metaphorical whiteboard here, right? So these aren't tickets per se right now. These are the key parts of the process. Yes, I'm using Post-it notes, and yes, I'm doing that. But as you'll see, when I start arranging this stuff, because who knows what order I need to do this in? I don't know. I'm just doing this so far based on book order. But as you'll see, the proof in the tail is that we don't actually end up doing them in book order. So let's have a look. Next. Great. So we've got what piece. In the how piece, you'll teach them a step-by-step procedure about how to go about whatever it is you're showing them. Okay, in the how piece, you'll teach a step-by-step procedure, how to go about wherever it is you're showing them. Okay, that's one sentence that could contain a hell of a lot. Diego asked a question. So far, this would be in the options column, right? This has got nothing to do with the Kanban board. This is a completely different planning exercise. Here we're creating a recipe. Yes, we're using a post-it notes. Yes, we're using a wall to stick them on, just like a Kanban, but it's a completely separate and different process. Great question, right? Don't worry, we'll get there. We're going to create the tickets, but right now, we're visually using, all you're seeing on my screen is my whiteboard with my post-it notes. Okay, so we can have multiple whiteboards, multiple post-it notes, right? Post-it notes are one of the most valuable planning tools in existence, as I will prove to you. So we need a how piece. Let's create. Create a how piece. Because here's the point. Why aren't these tickets yet? I hear you ask. Well, for me, honestly, they are tickets because I'm a master chef. I've done this process literally hundreds of times. Every time I design a lesson in the academy, I use this exact methodology. So for me, I could actually go ahead. But for the vast majority of you, if I said to you right now, go create a how piece, off you go. You'd have no clue. You wouldn't have a clue what it is, right? So that's why these are not tickets yet. Create a how piece, a step by step how to. Cool. Okay, awesome. Let's keep going. Oh, spoiler alert. There was the pink sheet, if you're quick. Okay. Now, in the now piece, you lay out their homework, the specific steps they need to do now in order to get started. Okay, that's relatively clear. So let's get our concept. Okay. Create now stack. Oops. Create now stack. Homework. What they should do between now and next lesson. Cool. Okay, great. All right. Great. Okay. So I've been reading this section. I've been creating tickets as I've been going. Now, a signature system is a structured way to move someone from a situation they're in now to a result they desperately want. And that's really awesome, because, he's used his own, terminology to create something which is a product. But what Taki, the secret sauce that Taki has brought into this, he's used these two base recipes from two people, Matt Church and Bernice McCarthy. And now, based on those two principles, he's going to build an entire course around those, okay, which is really, really, really cool. So I am looking, a signature system is like a route for a climber. I call them recipes. He calls them signature systems, right? You can use all different names, but effectively they're, but what I love about his definition is it moves them, here we are, ding. It moves them from the frustrations and fears, the problem, to the wants and aspirations, right? You may wonder, where did I see this before? Well, if you have a severe short-term memory loss thing going on, then you'll remember that this was the Y stack, right? This was the Y stack that he talked about. So basically, we need to figure out how to get them from the frustrations and fear to the wants and aspirations. That's the goal of any course. If any story doesn't involve, and this is a fundamental of life, if any process, if any, course, story, movie, if it doesn't involve a growth in a character arc, either if they start off the same and they end the same, it's a completely boring movie, right? It makes no sense. It's as a story. Now, you can have negative character arcs, right, which is where they start here and they end up even worse down there. Pretty depressing sort of movie, but they exist, right? But the vast majority of stories, courses, and anything are a hero's journey, which is they start here. They start as the moisture farmer on Tatooine, and they end up the Jedi Knight, and they have all sorts of adventures and ups and downs during that process. Okay, so that is and when you're creating a course or a product, you need to take people through that same journey of where they're at to where they want to be over a period of time. Okay. So, and it may not be okay. You may know, Ed, that was all gobbledygook, and that's cool, right? Because we're going to apply the certainty principle to build out our tickets. All right. So let's go. Okay, let's pause here. Let's pause. All right. First of all, what's been your biggest aha in the first part of this process so far? I'll just give you a minute to type in the box, or if you are watching this as part of the course, I want you to write it down on pen and paper because it's very important what your aha is so far. What have been your insights in what we've been talking about and what I've been showing you so far? So set a timer for 1 minute.
Okay, 1 minute and counting.
Okay, they're already starting to come in. This is planning, not CFTs. Exactly. Yeah. So this is how we create a recipe. Literally, how we create a recipe. And what is a recipe? The recipe will ultimately be a bunch of tickets customized to you, where you are with your particular level of knowledge and your particular level of skill as a business cook. So that's a great insight, Alex. Looking for action points, hidden tickets in Taki's book, or indeed in anybody's book, right? We're just using Taki's because it's such an important one. And let's face it, creating a product is a key element in the recipe, because for you to make money, you need to have some form of product. Okay, very good ideas for structured planning, having a proven process to follow, such a logical progression based on research we've already done. Yes. Taki's book is $3. There you go. This is a recipe for creating your course or product you offer for purchase. Each action points on Post-it notes so can rearrange to create a recipe. Well done, Jane. That is a great insight. I haven't specifically mentioned that, but you're 100% correct. The reason we pop it on Post-it notes is so they're so easy to rearrange. I need a couple of extra blank boards to use for recipe creation. Don't research until you get the big rocks recorded. Yeah, well, that's a very good insight. And you can use a wall for this. One of my favorites is windows or doors, or if you've got a cupboard, glass mirror cupboard, they work extremely well. In fact, I've got a very famous photo of me planning a presentation in my hotel room in my underwear, creating a set of a recipe for a presentation. Let's have a look. Planning and creating a recipe from a resource. It is a roadmap to put things we have investigated into an action plan, not just reading, but pulling it apart. I keep thinking about how this reminds me of pains, gains, and jobs to be done. How much better I like your straightforward approach on things. Using tickets to not getting distracted into researching everything ASAP. Yes, exactly, because what would have happened? Some people we would have lost them for 3 weeks studying every nuance of pink sheets, and you could literally study the nuances of pink sheets for 3 or 4 weeks, but we don't have to because we just need to learn enough to understand it so we can execute it. When things are spread out in front of you, it takes the anxiety away and replaces it with logical action. So funny, I always used to do project planning with Post-its on my walls. My co-workers thought I was crazy. No, you're not crazy. And as entrepreneurs, it's not only crazy, it's absolutely vital. Because if you do it digitally or you do it somewhere that's not physical, you will not have the impact. You're just not wired that way. All right, so let's have a look where we're at. Let's zoom out a little bit here. I'm loving this. This is so cool. Okay, so we've got research Matt Church, pink sheet on Google. We've got create a why stack. We've got create a proof stack, a slide with proof. Create a what stack, 3 to 5 key points, has a pink sheet. Create a how piece and create a now stack. Cool. But we still haven't designed our course yet, right? Which is the signature system. So let's keep going. Let me just scull my Nespresso. Foster's. One of the great inventions of mankind. Okay. Now let me get my... I'm going to need some more tickets here. Just getting some more post-it notes here ready. All right, cool. Let's action point. Get an espresso. Very good. It's definitely an enhancement to anybody's productivity and workflow. I think, particularly when you give people 1 minute exercises, perfect timing to make an espresso. Okay. Oops, wrong screen, Ed. Wrong screen. Okay, here we go. Let's work on the iPad. So here we go. All right, so we need to structure our course. So let's have a look. If you look at the structure of the program, you'll see there's a why video, a what video, 3 how videos, and a what next video. If you look at any training that I ever do in the academy, in the recipe, or anything, you'll see that I use this exact methodology. And the thing is, it scales, right? It scales from the big idea, right? So the overall thing, like at the recipe level, what's the concept of the recipe, right down to an individual training session. So this is a recipe for literally building a training session, a course, a chapter, a video, whatever. If you use this methodology, you can't go wrong. It's fantastic. So, and then you'll see, right, they're coming, we better build it. So the time to start, in addition to a weekly video, there's a weekly QA call. Time to start marketing and selling your signature system is right after you've mapped out the problem and your promise, laid out the key steps or module, and fleshed out the key points for each of them. Right, so we see here, so let's have a look. Signature system, okay. We're focusing on the first. Next, we want to promise what you're offering. It's like saying, hey, what you're going to work with me. Right now, you know where they are and where they want to go. If you have to get a group of 20 people from here to there quickly, what steps would you take? lay out the 6 or 7 key steps that move people from the problem to the promise. That's a signature system. Okay, so let's have a look at this. That's a big sentence, right? That's a big sentence. Okay, let's have a look here. So we definitely need to create our frustrations, fears, wants, and aspirations for the course. And then we need to create a series of steps. Okay. So we need to create frustration, fears, wants, and aspirations for my product. Then create steps. We need to create steps, 6 or 7 he mentioned, to create steps, 6 or 7, to get from fears and frustrations to wants and aspirations. Bloop, 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 bloop. Okay, all right. Okay, easy to write, not necessarily easy to execute. Okay, so that's fine, but we're just following the steps as they are doing. People ask me, Ed, how can you create such good stuff off a free PDF in a launch, or how can you do this? You're now learning how a master chef breaks down even a free step-by-step guide, right? So that I can then deconstruct any dish in front of me and be able to figure out exactly what I need to do to execute that dish, because I know that there are only 4 components to any dish, right? My salt, acid, fat, heat is the equivalent of my traffic, product, market, and conversion, right? It's the same, right? This is how I break everything down, right? So it's just like it's breaking down any recipe, any dish. So I can look at any dish and recreate it, right? But that takes skill and execution, right? And this is how I do it, right? So you're learning how to break these things down. We're taking all of our skills that we've learnt so far over the 11 modules so far and applying them into this point. All right, so we've got to create steps. Let's go back just to make sure we haven't got everything. Blah, blah, blah. Right, and then the time to start marketing and selling your signature system is right after you've mapped out the problem and your promise, laid out the key steps. Most people think, I'll build it and they will come, and they spend ages building their thing and they never get around to delivering it. Or they end up building something nobody wants. Once you know people are buying what you're selling, start putting your training material together. That's a freak out for high fact finders. For me, it's a natural part, but let's, again, put this in. Okay, so we've got that there. Sell product. Don't build it. We've designed it, but we haven't built it. Okay, cool. Marvelous. Okay, so let's have a look. Okay, folks, to design a course, here's all you have to do. Okay, we have to understand what a pink sheet is, create a Y stack, create a proof stack, create a what stack, create a how piece, create a now stack, create a fears, frustration, wants, and aspirations for the product, create 6 or 7 steps from the product, and then sell the product. Thanks for coming. That's how you do a product. Well done. What? You want more? Right, that's as much information as I've been able to glean, right, from Taki's book. Right, so go off and do it. Off you go. But we can't, right? I doubt most of you can, right? As I'm seeing with the chat comments, right? And that's fine. Of course you can't. How could you possibly do that? It's like the most. It's the equivalent in cooking of saying, "Oh, you just grab a pinch of this, a bit of that, just throw in a little bit of this, and bing, bang, bong, there's your beautiful dessert." All right? Doesn't work like that. We now have to look at our first thing I'm going to have a look at is we're going to have a look at our tickets, and we're going to have a look at what the correct order here should be of this process, because the first thing I've got here is pink sheet, right? But I think the most important thing that we have to do is create the Y stack. So if I have a look at the Y stack, that's the most important thing, right? Because until we understand it, are you not entertained? Exactly. It's one of my favorites. If we create unless we know what our fears, frustrations, wants, and aspirations are for our market, there's no way we can possibly do any of this stuff, right? So that to me is the most important thing, creating a Y stack. And indeed, so let's tap that out there. Let's lasso this. Oops, Daisy. Let's undo that. Let's lasso there. Got to be careful with my lassoing. Let's just put that down there for the moment. And so you can see why we're doing this on Post-it notes. We're doing it on Post-it notes because we're still figuring out, and we're trying to figure out the areas that we're doing. So now, if I'm looking at this, we really need this over here. Okay, so we've got create a Y stack, and that's actually, a Y stack is a thing. Now, right now, let's have tap that. So, and let's tap that. So we're out of there. Let's just go zoom in here on our creating a Y stack, which, as we learned in the book, which is understanding the fears, frustrations. So we actually need, if I just blow up here, we need, oops. So an actual, if we broke down the ticket, what do we need for a Y stack? We need 3 fears, which lead to the big frustration. We need 3 wants, which lead to the big aspiration. Okay, cool. So let's bring that in. Okay, so what we're starting to do now is now we get a feel for the order. So if we go, I'll zoom right out here. If we're looking at our whiteboard, right, we've got a whole bunch of steps left to right, which is sort of like our timeline, right? So let me draw this here for you so you get it, right? So across here, actually, let's use that a bit thicker, right? Across here is our timeline. Right, so we just want to figure out what are the steps. If like for a storyboard in a movie, right, from left to right is here where we have to start, and here's where we have to finish. Right, so from left to right, top of our board is our timeline, and we've got our categories here of the steps. Then what we do is down here, we do our breakdown. So horizontally, we do our breakdown to CFTs for each step. Okay, does that make sense? Let me know in the chat. Does that make sense? Yes, right? Cool. Fantastic. Awesome. Cool. So here's where you start to here's where we've brought together all the ingredients, and you can see all the hard work you've done so far is to figure this out. Okay. So now, just like any master chef, do you know where there's a recipe where a master chef has just made an assumption, right? Has just made an assumption because it's so ingrained in them that they forget to mention a part of the recipe. Have you ever cooked something where there's just been something in the recipe that's frankly just missing? And it's typically because they have assumed it's such a basic thing that you would know, unless you didn't know, right? This happens all the time. Well, guess what? In Taki's thing, there is exactly that, right? Pardon me. Because, what we don't have is what problem is my course going to solve? And that's an incomplete equation. You can't define that, right? And it was assumed, he said it. Remember, he said divide the course up into 6 or 7 sections, because what he actually meant there was 6 or 7 or 8 weeks, right, of a course, a decent sized course, right, is typically when I start designing something, I start with, a 6 to 8 week course design, right? And because here's the thing, what problem is my course going to solve for a period of time? So, for example, the recipe, right, is going to get you to the point where you are absolutely certain of the number of tickets and your execution that you're going to take for your courses, right, for going forward. It's not going to make you $1 million in 12 weeks, right? That's not the case. If we were talking about, the outliers can make $1 million in, a year, it's much more likely that it will take you a good couple of years to get to the point where you're at $100,000 a month to $1 million, $1 million a year sort of thing, right? That's the natural progression of things. So we have to solve things for a period of time. So, for example, a mentoring student of mine was designing a particular real estate course, and we had to say, okay, what is the best result that we could deliver along that timeline of where they want to get to where they are currently, what can we deliver in 6 weeks? Right? So that's a very important thing. And all of a sudden I can hear you say, oh, but I've never done a course before. I don't know. I have no idea what I can deliver in 6 weeks. That's why we do a beta process. We cook our recipes and do tests in the test kitchen. No recipe that's ever published has not, I don't know if you know this or not, but before a recipe goes in a cookbook, it's literally tested in a test kitchen dozens and dozens of times to make sure it replicates the results, right? You don't do a recipe until it replicates the results. And guess what? There's a recipe for doing that, which is cool. So we need to identify what problem is my course going to solve over what period of time. And typically, as I say, the period of time that I like to use, is 6 weeks, right? So if you're worried about what period of time that's going to be, I just say, 6 weeks. All right, so that's what I tend to suggest. If you are at all concerned about that. Okay, now let's apply the certainty principle. Okay, so you've got create a Y stack. We've got to create the fears, frustrations. We've got to come up with 3 fears, 1 frustration, 3 wants, and 1 aspiration. Right? That's the breakdown of the Y stack. And that was done in a lot of detail, right? So this is all pulled from the course itself. Okay? So here's what I want you to do in the chat. And if you're watching the course, you need to do this on pen and paper. What is your level of certainty of executing the Y stack? Understanding 3 fears, 1 frustration, 3 wants, and the 3 big aspirations. You may have heard this before as the pains, the gains of your particular market. Okay, so I want you to give you a minute you shouldn't need a minute, you should need 10 seconds. Type the number from 1 to 10 and you're not allowed to use 7. No 7s. Go in the chat, all of you. We've got 9, 6, 9, 10, 6, 8, 6, 9, 8, 8, 6, 8, 4. Okay. 5, 9. Cool. So for those of you who answered below 6 or below, what would you need to do? What CFT would you need to create to do? Anybody can jump in here in the chat. What CFT would you need to create if you answered 6 or below? What CFT would you need to create before you could even execute on the Y stack? A pains, gains, jobs to be done exercise. Very good, Bill. So you need to create what is my market's fears and frustrations? Spend 50 minutes figuring out what my market's fears and frustrations are. Is there a recipe, right, that you could find which discovers these exact things for you? Of course there is. Right, it's called Pains, Gains, and Jobs to be Done. Right, and that is found, for those of you who are interested, in the fundamentals section of the Academy. Right, so you can see there, like for most of you, you were certain, right? You knew what you had to do for this part of the process. You got it, so that's great, right? So we can move on. But so if we look at then our tickets, so if we highlight the tickets here. So our CFTs are CFT here Create 3 fears, 1 frustration, 3 wants, and 1 aspiration for course. And point that there. Let me grab a post-it note. And CFT here. CFT here is decide key problem and time frame. Because there's no point, as I say, I'll make you $1 million in a week when that's clearly out of the question for the people, most of the people that you're teaching. You want to, the classic, over deliver, under promise, that sort of thing. Decide key problem and time period. And just as, like, if you're even floating about that, my favorite time period is 6 weeks, because then we're going to be able to design up a product. Okay, so we've created our Y stack for our product. We've decided what the problem is. Now, if we look at our time, remember, again, let's zoom right out. If we looked at our timeline, right, we've got create a proof stack, create a what stack, create a how piece, create a now stack. That's actually guts work, right? What we actually need to do, and you saw it was the 3rd chapter, right? It was the 3rd chapter. Is we need to create the steps. The next obvious thing to do is to create the steps to get from our fears and frustrations through to our wants and aspirations. This is such a cool program. Right, so what we need to do is I need to drag this one over to here. That's the next part of our timeline. Can you see what we're doing here with our fears and frustrations and our timeline and everything, right? Even I've completely changed the course of breaking down this recipe, because if you look at how Taki presented it, it sort of makes sense. But if you look at the way that we need to actually execute on this, we really need to understand the core parts of what our course will look like. All right. So we need to have our, let's blow into this again. Well, actually, no, I'm not going to say this. Let's you do it. Okay. First of all, whenever we've got a ticket like this, we apply our certainty principle to it. Do we have, out of a rank of 1 to 10, how certain are you that you could create the 6 to 7 steps to get from the fears to frustrations to the wants of aspirations, which we created in this step? What is your point? Is this an epiphany bridge? No, you may be having an epiphany right now. I hope so. I really hope so, but no. 9, 8, 8, 8, 6, 10, 9. Come on, all of you. Don't sit back. And if you're watching this on the video, make sure you put down a number. Write a number of certainty. Okay, so there's a lot of people who are 9s and 8s, which is great. Great teacher. Whoever's teaching you must be awesome, right? And there's not many below 6, which is fantastic as well, right? So that would indicate to me that we probably only need 1 CFT here. Bloop. So our CFT would be so let's write S. What are you doing? Let's make sure we note this as a CFT. CFT. Okay, I am going to get you to write the CFT. Okay, I'm going to give you a 1 minute. What CFT would you create for getting the 6 to 7 key points for our product, the 6 or 7 major steps? Let's go. I'm going to give you a minute to write the CFT in the chat. Okay, we've got a couple coming in. Please keep them coming in. So Diego's got here, brainstorm solutions for the problem. That doesn't sound like a CFT at all. What methodology would you brainstorm? And by the way, you're breaking down, you need to come up with the six topic. If we're using a 6-week course, what are the 6 things that we're going to break our course down into? Right? 50 minutes brainstorming. Terrible CFT. Come on. I've taught you better than this. There's so much for my thinking I'm a good teacher. You want to have the 6 or 7 sections that you want to break this down into. Customer interviews. No, you've done the customer interviews. You should have the information. Identify modules. Now we're starting to get there. Spend 50 minutes chunking the 6 to 7 steps from getting from start point to solution endpoint. Now we're cooking with gas. Create mind map for how I get from FFs to WAs and use to identify the main steps. Yes, Sharon, I'm loving it. Imagine myself taking the psychological journey of learning and overcoming and jot down the 6 steps for the modules. That's okay. Imagine I worry about, because it's not a pen and paper technique, but that's very, very warm. 50 minutes for creating 6 steps for each week. Well, Alex, we still need to understand what each week's going to be first. So my favorite here is I love 50 minutes create mind map. Now, you're all different, right? This is create mind map of all steps to get from FF to WA. 50 minutes, create mind map for all steps to get from FF to WA to find 6 obvious chunks. Which will be week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. What else have we got? 50 minutes, 6 solutions to move from problem to promise. Okay, that gives you a lot of solutions, but it doesn't give you this. There's a lot of people here who had certainties 9 and 10, yet when we go, and this is great, right? This is a great, so you've got a 9 or a 10, which means that you should have been able to, right, because the problem that we were trying to solve here is create 6 to 7 steps to get from FF to WA, right? That was the thing. We've got 6, and if you can't even visualize, so we have, and again, this was in the course. You know, what is week 1? What is week 2? What is week 3? What is week 4? So for me, it would be market. Week 2 is traffic. Week 3 is conversion. Week 4 is product. Week 5 is breakdown cookbook. And week 6 is Instagram. Right? Boom. The point, so again, this is great, right? Because your certainty outstripped your actual ability to elucidate it on a CFT. So really, most of you are a 4 or a 5 in this part. Right? So this is free write 50 minutes. We know free writing is probably best for 10 minutes, but that's good. That's the thing. Now, here's the deal, right? If you were coming up with this recipe, where could you go? Where could you go to help break down CFTs for you? Where could you possibly go? You could go to the Academy Slack and say, hey, here's the ticket that I'm thinking of writing for this thing. Does it make sense? Or even better, has anybody done this process before and have they already created tickets? So Eugene suggested for him, it would be 2 CFTs, 50 minutes on listing everything you should do to get from A to B, then 50 minutes fondling to arrange into 6 lessons. I reckon you could do it a lot quicker than that, Eugene, but if that's for you, that is great. I love that. 2 CFTs, 50 minutes of listing everything you could do, then 50 minutes fondling. Fantastic. Okay, that is great. So for you, it's a 2 CFT process. I love it, right? This is why it's so much better for you to execute on your own CFTs. So far, we have our board of 3 CFTs, okay? 3 CFTs here. So, and for some of you, you probably might have 1, 2, or 3 here in the create steps. In fact, it's interesting. I would have thought that this part, but we've already done the work. The reason that this part is a lot of the create the Y stack is easy for you is that we've already, right, that create a Y stack, because we've already done that work, right? We've already spent time figuring out what the pains are in our market and what the problems are and where people want to get to. What are they trying to solve? What are they trying to achieve? We've done that, right? So that's the part of the process. And that, folks, is how you break down any market. So your homework for this week using the Now stack, right? Homework, what they should do now between now and the next lesson. Is you should have a look at a favorite process. Somebody mentioned Russell Brunson's Epiphany Bridge process. Guess what? You could create tickets out of that. Pick a process to start breaking down a process. So the first part of the process, and what I want you to do is, first of all, I just want you to timeline it out. Remember, the first step that we did was we timelined out, based on the materials in front of us, what the start was to the finish, based on what they said, right? They were not CFTs, right? They were just, here's the thing. And the reason we did them on Post-it notes, as you saw, the way it was listed in the book, and then we looked at what's the most obvious thing to do first. Well, we need to figure out what our course is, meant that we actually needed to bring the Y stack and the create steps stack, pardon me, over to the start of our timeline over here. Then you start breaking each of those problems down, break them down into CFTs for each step. And that is how you go about breaking it down. So what I would love you to do as your homework is to pick your favorite, your favorite bit of the puzzle. And by the way, spoiler alert, I've done exactly this in the fundamentals training in the academy, is all done like this, right? And you actually get the tickets, right? You get the tickets to do that. Now, you may not need to do the fundamentals training based on where you're at and your level of expertise, right? For me, I could do this process. Actually, in truth, I could do this process in 1 to 2 CFTs max, right? Because I've done it so many times and I've done the work in my market and I know exactly where they need to go. I get it, right? So I do this whole process in 10 minutes because I've done it literally hundreds and hundreds of times. But when you're first starting out, it may take you 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 CFTs to do. And that's totally cool. Okay. First of all, I want you to spend a minute as what's the key aha from the cookbook lesson session 12? What's the key aha insight that you've got? I'll give you a minute. Pop that down into the chat box. And of course, if you're watching this video as part of the course, please write this down. Write it down. Okay, we've got a few coming in already, which is great. Keep writing. Creating a product is a methodical process. Follow it and succeed. Yes. Break down tickets until I get to a level 10 of certainty. I very rarely have level 10 certainty, particularly, here's the thing, if you've never done the process before, you can never put a 10 certainty, right? So perfection is a killer, right? So you'll never get a level, like if I haven't done a process before, by definition, it's not going to be level 10 of certainty because you've never done it before. The best level of certainty for a process that I've never done is about an 8, right? Because there could be something that bites me in the butt, right? So that I am not aware of. The only times I can ever put 10 certainty is when I have done that process on at least a few occasions and have got the exact same results. So I know that it's exactly replicable every time. And most of this, by the way, will be a 10 after you get it. Now I know how I'm going to implement expert secrets. Exactly, Craig. Very good. Yes, you break it down. Understanding that not everything is linear and people or master chefs can forget to give information. And it's not intentional. It's not intentional. They really are trying to give you the best information they possibly can in the constraints that they have, right? Steps versus CFT breakdown made it clear for me. Yay. I can learn anything in a way I've never been able to in the past. Oh, that's very pleasant. I'm very excited to hear that. Planning before CFTs. Apply certainty principle to every step as I'm creating. 7 plus certainty then. No, 8 plus certainty. We're not allowed to use 7s. All right. Remember the certainty principle. All right. If you go back to that lesson, right, you're not allowed, you rate out of 1 to 10, but you are not allowed to use a 7. From theory to practicalities, great and clear map. Finally, have a structured plan that helps step out the exact pathway needed from start to finish, i.e. a recipe. Very good. Mapping roadmaps to the timeline, then into digestible tickets. Using post-it notes when I'm going through on writing and how to be a writer to get the recipe for me. Exactly. Still not sure what a pink sheet is. Well, we haven't got to that part in the process, but what I wanted to demonstrate, even though it was the first thing mentioned in the chapter, we haven't got to the pink sheet part of the process, right? Which you would still have to execute, right, and design each part of that. The process will help me cope with overwhelm after reading any how-to material. Identify homework elements for my students. Cool. Yeah, absolutely. What are they to go on? Because if you don't tell them what to go on with, they'll just sit on their butt and not do anything. So you could go, if you wanted to, as homework, you could continue to fill out. This is because where would the where would the pink sheets come into it? They would come into, after you've designed, the 3 to 5 key points each has a pink sheet. So right there, if you didn't know what a pink sheet is, guess what? You have to spend a CFT learning about pink sheets. Where are you going to find that? So Google pink sheets plus Matt Church, right? That's an example of how to figure out how that is. But here's the thing, right? Remember, that was the first thing. So if you were doing this the old way, the traditional way, particularly the high quick starts would have ignored pink sheets altogether and got themselves into trouble. The high fact finders would have spent 3 weeks researching, because let me tell you, there is enormous materials, some whole books on pink sheets and pink sheet design. You need none of it, right? You just need to know the basics, and you'll more than be able to execute what needs to be done. But you would have been off and researching pink sheets, and you wouldn't even have a plan yet. You wouldn't even have a recipe. Why bother researching what pink sheets are until you actually know what the steps are going to be? Why go off and do that thing when it's at some point in the future? That's what I'm trying to save you from. The biggest mistake people make, and they get so frustrated, is typically they would have gone off and researched the pink sheets, and that would have that you might have spent who knows how long, because you were learning pink sheets, but guess what? You didn't know what you were learning pink sheets for, so you overlearned the hell out of pink sheets, right? You learned way more than actually what you needed to understand to be able to execute on that very powerful idea, and that causes so many problems. This process will help me cope with overwhelm after reading any how-to material. Yes, absolutely. Because if you can't visualize it out in front of you, you've got to figure out, okay, what am I missing here? And if you do it out and you can post the photo in the academy and say, hey, gang, here's my Post-its. What am I missing? I don't understand this step. How would you break this down? How easy new terminology can cause unintentional or don't know how detours. Yes, right? Because, Taki's book is full of new terminology because it's a deliberate part of what he does, and you should do, right? Part of making something yours is coming up with a unique name for it. And but that can send people into research mode instead of execution mode. And so that's what we've done here today. Okay. Are there any questions? If you've got any questions, now's the time to put them in the chat box. Obviously, this is if you're live. If you're not live, you can put any questions, of course, in the recipe channel of the Academy. There is #the-recipe, and that is the perfect place to do all of that. And let me have this robuster. When reading a book, is it best to take notes and then write out the tickets to work with? Alex, my dear friend. The best way to break down a book is the Zettelkasten methodology, by far, how to take smart notes, which we actually taught and is available in the Zettelkasten channel, #Zettelkasten. And that's how you break down a book. But if you want to execute a book, right, if you want to break it down for doing this process here, then typically you've probably gone through the book and done, well, what I've done is Zettelkasten notes. In the old days, you saw, right? You saw how I'd gone through notes. And then I would break it down, right? So I'm breaking it down because here's the thing. If you read the whole book, right, if you read the whole book and just don't take the part of, like, as you'll see next week when I go through my Instagram recipe, right, the next module, the next lesson, right, what you'll see is where I have dived into just one chapter of a book, right? Because I don't have when you're executing, when we're doing the recipe, I want you to get to your 68 tickets as fast as humanly possible. And that doesn't involve reading whole books, right? It involves taking out the elements of the book that you need and then creating our timeline of execution, creating our recipe to execute on that part of the process. And so that's where we're doing. So when you're reading a book, is it best to take notes? Yes, but you should take smart notes, because the science of note taking has literally completely changed in the last 12 months. That was my book of the year. And indeed, our January training in the academy was all about the Zettelkasten and process. So that's what I would do. And then when I'm ready to execute, I would go, okay, well, I need to know how to get traffic for Instagram. And I would just be able to do a search of my hashtags for Instagram and traffic. And boom, okay, that chapter in that book. Okay, cool. Okay, and so then I break open the book and say, okay, let's do the tickets. Now, some books are extremely helpful. Like they'll have a literally a step-by-step guide at the end of the chapter, which is great. So I would go back to that step-by-step guide and do that, for example. Let's have a look. Not a question. Something I deal with as a journalist, often writing about horses for the mainstream, is finding ways to explain terms in a way that doesn't dumb down yet makes it clear, so pros are not alienated. Yeah, absolutely. It's that's a nice balancing act. But here we need to design for our audience. And if you're an educator, if you're trying to get a result, you really do need to assume lowest common denominator as a general rule. For all of us, there is a free PDF download on the relevant book at matchchurch.com/books. Yes, yeah, the book on pink sheets and all that stuff is indeed free. By the way, I think I popped it up there before. I use iBooks to store all my PDFs, so I've got all my all my PDFs available at all times. So you can see here any PDF that I need, I have just literally sitting here in my iBooks. It's very handy because it syncs across all of my things. But that's a pink sheet, right? And again, context, model, metaphor, statement, explanation, study, and story doesn't mean anything until you understand what those bits are. But they're incredibly powerful methodology for helping you create things. Very powerful. I use it for everything. So that'll be something that's awesome for you. All right, folks, there we have it. Thanks for participating. I couldn't wait to be able to show you this lesson and show you how to break down a recipe, because it's such, now you have the tools to be able to break down any sort of process, any book, any PDF guide, any audio podcast. It doesn't matter. You've now got the tools to be able to break them down and create a recipe out of them, which is customized for you based on your level of certainty for each of those parts. And that is very, very, very exciting. And of course, remember, you've got the squad, right? Which is awesome, right? So you will be able to, like, if you get stuck, or you go to the recipe and saying, hey, I'm stuck. Has anybody ever done this? Or here's a photo of my timeline. What am I missing here? Or this particular part of my timeline, I'm clueless. Have any of you had to do this? What are we doing here? This is part of the power of all of this, and just understanding that there are methodologies, there are recipes, and that's what makes it so exciting. All right, with that, thank you very much, everybody, and I will and let's turn that recording off here so I forget. See you, everybody. There we are.